I was gonna ask
come
about
on,
that.
man, that is so ridiculous.
I've never seen anything like that before.
Since this show is more aimed at children, I think there are adults who don't understand this yet. That don't understand that, guess what? Not everyone is exactly like you. And you don't need to treat them like they're lesser than. They're just different. There are things that she can do that you can't do.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Skeleton Crew discussion show, where I go through each episode of Skeleton Crew and discuss it with a different guest each week. Last week, I was joined by my lovely wife, Megan, and we spoke about episode 5. But this week, I am joined by Tonya Todd to speak about Zero Friends Again. So 6th episode, only 2 more to go in this, and this episode was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. But before we get into the episode, Ms. Tonya Todd, if anyone's watching on YouTube, you can see in the background a couple of books because Tonya has been very busy. So this year was the release of Comics Lit, Volume 1, which Tonya and Tony, they were both on Genuine Chit-Chat.
That was last year.
Oh, of course, because we're recording the second. Of course. Yes. You've got one book coming out this year. It's so weird. I knew I'd slip up on the 2024 thing eventually. I knew it would get me. But on
Day
recording,
2.
On air, it got me. How terrible. So in 2024, Comics Lit Volume 1 was released, and that was Tony and Tonya. They contributed to the essays and also edited and basically put it together, orchestrated it. But this year, in 2025, this is when 52 Love comes out. So Tonya, just tell us a little bit about that. And obviously, you've got Morning Sacrifice as well. You do stuff for FemOn. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we delve into the episode, instead of doing plugs at the end.
Which is funny because I've been on your show so many times. How is it possible that your listeners don't already know way too much about me?
It's the Stan Lee thing.
That's right.
It could be
It could
be your first listen. It could be. It could be anyone's first listen.
So my name is Tonya Todd. I am an author, actress, activist. I directed my first short film in 2023, which is still in editing. But, it's coming along and it's looking beautiful. As Mike said, I am a contributing editor and essayist for Comics Lit, which is an essay collection that compares comic books to classic literature and talks about how they are a form of high art. We are in the depths of working on Volume 2 right now, and Mike is going to be either in Volume 2 or 3. We haven't decided yet, but he is definitely going to be a participant. And then 52 Love, which is coming out in February on Valentine's Day. That is a book of intimacy tips, which gives 1 tip per week, hence the 52. And I did a podcast about it a few years ago where I had guests come on the show. They would try one of the tips with their partner and then talk about their experience. And Mike was one of the guests.
I was. Megan and I came on, and I read Megan a poem. She read me a poem as well. My poem made her cry, though, which was good. That's kind of what we want. Insight,
poems that
emotion.
You wrote.
Yes.
Like, more importantly, they're poems that you wrote for each other.
Yes, which was very, very enjoyable to write. It's my second poem that I've written. My third was on Alison Shelton's Where I'm From, who is a FemOn collective individual as well, and also
she's in the essay collection for Comics Lit.
Yeah, Black Widow essay, which was fantastic. So Tonya's busy. Lots of cool, great stuff. Whether you're into nerdy stuff, if you're into sort of other things that it doesn't have to be nerdy. It can be anything. But if you're listening to a Star Wars discussion, you probably want to hear about the nerdy stuff. So Comics Lit, go read that. Check it out. Support indie creators and all that jazz. So let's get into something which is created by the most opposite to an indie creator thing in the universe, which is Disney. So Skeleton Crew. What have you thought about Skeleton Crew before this episode started? So first of all, what were your thoughts before it was announced? Did you have any hype to it? I think most people I've spoken to are like, meh. And then from there, how have you found the episodes leading up to this one?
So I didn't have any idea what it was before I watched
it from trailers, and this wasn't one that slipped through the cracks like Ahsoka or anything like that. There was nothing.
Not at all. No, Ahsoka I figured out was coming. Really just her in general. In the acting industry, I sometimes am privy to casting announcements before they're made public, and I saw that Rosario Dawson's going to be part of the Star Wars universe. It's like, oh, she looks just like Ahsoka. Now I know there's going to be a live action Ahsoka.
I did the same thing. And also I knew she tweeted when Ahsoka had there's a certain in a certain Clone Wars season, something happens to Ahsoka and something else happens to her in Star Wars Rebels. And in the Rebels thing, when that happened, Rosario Dawson posted a thing referencing that, and everyone was like,
And see,
"Oh,
I didn't know
she
anything
likes
about her.
Ahsoka." Yeah, hashtag
Yeah.
Ahsoka lives. That's what she posted after series 2. But yeah, sorry. So with
He's already invested.
yeah, exactly. That's it. Perfect. But sorry, with Skeleton Crew, so you knew nothing really going in. Did you? You probably
had
knew
no
about it coming
idea
out
what
because
it
I
was.
mentioned it.
I didn't know if it was live action. I didn't know if it was animated. I didn't know the target audience for it. It's Star Wars. I'm going to show up for it. That's basically how I roll. And I don't like spoilers because it ruins the story. Then I watch the first episode. I'm like, this is Star Wars as directed by Steven Spielberg.
That is how it feels.
It is, but that doesn't mean I disliked it. I just didn't know. I didn't have many expectations going in, and this doesn't feel like normal Star Wars stuff. It's definitely the universe. You can see all of these elements. There's these references. I wasn't even sure when we were in this episode, and it may have said it, and I missed it at the beginning, but so I'm watching. And I'm seeing we're focusing on children. Am I going to want to watch this show? And turns out, yes, I do. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the Steven Spielberg-esque elements to it. I like the music. I like the tone. I like the humor. And I like the found family element that he often explores and the types of challenges. Now, I've listened to your podcast, and you keep saying this thing about low stakes, and they are not low stakes. They are just believable stakes.
Mm-hmm.
Low stakes usually makes for boring television.
Mm-hmm.
Low stakes is like, oh, I was hoping to, have a ham sandwich today, but there's no ham.
I thought you were going to make a beef joke. I thought you were going to say, I want to make a barbecue, but there's no beef left, so no low stakes. Sorry.
Oh my gosh.
I know the low stakes thing. I mean more so in a sense of low galactic stakes because of Disney, because of Lucasfilm Marvel. I think they've both ruined storytelling to a degree, and even in wider Hollywood, DC do it as well, where it's like, we need to beat this villain or the world is going to end. And it's like, well, I sure hope the world ends. Well, there's a sequel coming out that's set after this.
Which makes it not believable. They're not believable.
Very few films do that. Yeah, very few end the world, especially not ones in a franchise. That generally doesn't happen unless it's sci-fi and in a scale of ridiculously, So I'm like, that's what
not in a sideshow. Like, they're not going to world of a sideshow.
But yeah, the low stakes thing. I mean, I love it. I want that. Some of my favorite films are, I call them people movies. Just really, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Little Miss Sunshine, Juno. Those kinds of, my favorites way back.
Those stakes feel monumental to the people.
Exactly. It's perspective.
So they're not really low stakes. They're just attainable stakes. Like that. It actually affects someone on a personal level, and it feels believable to the audience that this is going to affect you. It's not something that is so outlandish that you're not even worried. Like, the whole point of high stakes is so that you are engaged and invested in whether it happens or not. If the stakes are too high, then you're not invested because you're just not worried.
Rise of Skywalker. That was that's basically that's my thing. Rise of Skywalker is the one which is got that, where at the end of it you're like, I wonder if Palpatine's going to destroy the universe and every single good guy who's ever been in Star Wars ever. I wonder if that's how they're going to end the saga. But yeah, when you get it, that's why I love Rebels so much, because when you've got this family, and I've said it before, no spoilers, but you get a family, you get a group of people, and bad stuff happens, my friends, and it kills you. But because you haven't got all these untouchable characters, you have real stakes. You have things that can happen, like characters getting wounded, like severely. That's a big thing. And to these kids, I think it's a very fine line when you have kids and stuff. And I think these kids have been absolutely smashing it. Have you been, because you mentioned about the not being too sure about it. Are you kind of on my level where it's like, there's certain products with kids which you're like, amazing work, but often they can just be a bit jarring. Right.
Like they're there just so they can say it appeals to children, but they should still be talented. You should still tell a good story. But I think that these kids are talented, and if they're annoying, they're supposed to be. Like, that is part of it. You go through this phase where you're annoying and immature, and you make bad decisions based on that immaturity. And I think they even address that in here. Like, I'm not having this baby fight with you. Like, we're dealing with a real situation. Stop being a child. I know we're children, but we can't be children right now.
100%. And what was have you had a favorite episode thus far, including this one? Have you had any favorite episodes, or have you just found it as one kind of big story?
I don't know.
Because it's not as episodic. Because we found Acolyte was weird. It was meant to be one story, but because they swapped everything around, it kind of felt disjointed. But with like Mando, very episodic. Whereas, Ahsoka and Kenobi are more streamlined. I think this feels more like Ahsoka, more like Kenobi, but it does have a little bit of the Mando element because it's kind of like they do have a kind of a goal, and it's what's the kind of the next thing to do to the goal. So I think it does well to be both, but I think all the episodes have been really even for me.
I feel like I probably do have a favorite episode, but nothing stands out. And, because of this season, we're dealing with so many things right now with the holidays. I just had a birthday, and it's a lot of holidays at once.
It's not
happy
like birthday to you. I'm so sorry.
My point is just I've been a little distracted, and so I'm not maybe dissecting the show where as well as I might ordinarily do so. It's kind of a blur. Yes, I've been watching it, but I've been doing a lot of other stuff too, and so I can't pinpoint even the names of the episodes except there was one episode that was so obvious what it was. It was like driving me crazy. It's the name of the episode. He has said it 50 times. How do you not know that he just can't say?
Oh, the Atatin one.
Yeah, I can't say.
I don't remember no Atatin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
he's saying he can't say it.
the episode names are all quotes, which I do quite enjoy. But I would say, have you felt then, if I change the question to, have you felt in such a busy season, having something like Skeleton Crew to watch once a week without the same, for me, pressure, I'd say, of something like Kenobi or Ahsoka for spoilers and things like that, have you felt that it's been a nice little break from the buzz of the outside world to get in this nice little Star Wars kind of niche? Or have I put pressure on you because you knew you'd have to come on and watch them?
I wouldn't have watched it if I didn't have this schedule. I would have waited until after the holidays.
Okay.
So for me, it was like, you know what? I need to keep watching it so that I don't end up having to watch like 5 the night before we do this show. And as it was, I completely spaced even watching it yesterday.
I only watched it about an hour before we recorded, which is, I didn't watch it, again, same as you. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I didn't even watch it the day it came out, which I quite like. I don't feel pressured to watch it.
But the day it came out was New Year's Eve, like I had plans.
A week before it was Christmas, wasn't it? Well,
right. And it was my birthday. So it was like, yeah, this is not first on the list. So I would have just waited until after the holidays and maybe watched it in fewer sittings. It's not a show that I felt like I needed to tune in every week, but I did so because of this recording.
Heyo. Keeping Tonya's
That said,
time.
it was a nice break, and I did enjoy watching it. I was never like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to watch this when I have all these other things happening. It was a nice break, but I didn't go into it thinking it would be. It was just like something I needed to do.
Yeah, that's a fair way of putting it. I think with me, I like it, but it's low pressure, which I appreciate. And I think with the Marvel shows now, after we watched Agatha all along, we were like, let's not watch it when it comes out. We're not fast. And then we just, one day, we're like, let's just watch a bit. And then we watched a couple and we're like, actually, this is pretty good. Then we watched the whole thing over like a week or like 2 weeks, I think. And I'm like, I much prefer, I like the week by week stuff. I still like that when it's when it was, I think maybe when it was 10 years ago, when it was like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or something like that. I loved the world watching one show. And apart from like, I think Bake Off, we get that a bit. And then there's other like reality TV that other people do in the UK, which I don't really watch. There's a few, not as much now, other shows that have that. But generally now I'm like, with Megan, because we've got lives and we have stuff to do, I'm like...
Because you're a married man now?
I am. I think I'd rather just now, if it was excluding Star Wars, because I love Star Wars, but I think with Marvel, I think I'm just going to binge. But let's get in this episode. So, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, who is incredible in so many different ways, but especially, I think some of her best work is her directing of Star Wars episodes, because I think pretty much when you look at the seasons of Mando, I can't remember if she did Book of Boba Fett, but any episode of Star Wars she's directed is always within the top 2 of the season, every time. So I appreciate that. So how did you find, we'd have to go for chronologically, we can kind of dot around, but kids go down and shoot at the start, and then KB's augs, so augmented things kind of stop, but she's okay. So let's jump off of there. How have you felt about KB's character, really? Because I think this is quite a central episode around her.
I like her a lot. I really love both girls. I think they're both great. In different ways, they have different personalities, but I enjoy both of them, and I think that they were both needed for this mission. I don't think that they could have been as successful without both of them. I don't feel like the boys are contributing as much.
No, I feel like it's almost like that Leia, I think, in certain respects, in A New Hope a little bit, where the guys are kind of like, we've saved you. Well, now what? And she's like, right, in the garbage chute. And they've almost just gone, we'll go from A to B and we're done. And I feel like
where's
with
my
these
reward?
characters,
and she's like, there's still things to happen here, and I'm not the most important part of it. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the girls in this, they have that, Fern has got the kind of, is pushing for direction along with Wim, and they do kind of clash, but I do like, Wim does let her lead. She is the cap. They all just kind of accept she's the captain.
Well, he doesn't let her lead. He just leads. And
and he just is like, actually, this is probably, he kind of wants to be the leader, but I think this journey is almost about him finding out about himself, that he isn't where he thinks he is in a way, but that's okay. Right. But KB, since day one, I've said she's the one that has interested me the most because of the eyepiece thing that comes down. So what about KB have you liked so much? And did you find her appeal to begin with, or was this episode the turning point?
I've liked her the entire time. In fact, I think all the kids are pretty good actors too.
Oh, 100%. Some of the best ensemble kids I've seen in a while.
But I think she's the strongest actor out of all of them. She's had to deal with the most range. She's, one of the cool kids. But then she's having to deal with, hey, guess what? It's really hard for me to keep up with you. Like, yes, I'm so glad that you are my friend and this is the life that I have. However, I am not built like you. And thus, I don't have the same capabilities. And the way they handled that is such an important lesson for children to learn. And since this show is more aimed at children, I think there are adults who don't understand this yet. That don't understand that, guess what? Not everyone is exactly like you. And you don't need to treat them like they're lesser than. They're just different. There are things that she can do that you can't do. Just accept that we're different. Go with your strengths, but be aware that we don't all have the same strengths.
Different but equally valuable.
Right.
That's how I see it. And that's the one of the things I love about this ensemble is unlike the Goonies, this show gets compared to Space Goonies was kind of the like elevator pitch for it, and I think that does work aptly without too much expectation. Because Goonies for me is much more, it's a vibe. There's a couple of like characters, a couple of moments, but for me, Goonies is a vibe. I love that. It's like having an adventure with your friends and just it actually go. Imagine if this crazy thing happened, and then the Goonies actually happens. That's right. How I kind of feel it. And with Goonies, I found that from the get-go, you're like, that's the smart kid, because Data's clearly the best kid in the whole thing, but he's the smart kid, he's the this kid, he's the that. And with these characters, you do have that, but I feel like the archetypes that make them up as characters are not so one-dimensional, or aren't so clear and immediate. I think they're not as carved, if you know what I mean. They're still a bit more malleable. This is one of those times which is their coming-of-age moments. I know the Goonies is for them too, but I liked that with these characters, I feel like we're finding out who they are while they are at the same time a lot more so than
but you
Goonies.
Think they're the four houses of the Potterverse?
Well, now that you've said that, now it makes it seem simple. What? So would Wim be Slytherin, Fern be Gryffindor?
Oh, he would be Gryffindor because he wants to be brave. Like he wants to do all of this stuff. He's the one who's actually scared, but he's trying. Like you see him overcoming. You think he's a hero inside. He might be causing all this trouble, but he is a hero inside. Like he picked up the lightsaber. He tried. He did it wrong, and I love that moment.
That's amazing. One of the best moments.
But that's what a hero would do. Like, I have this. I can try. I believe in myself. That felt like a very brave Gryffindor kind of thing to do.
And you think Fern is more Slytherin because she's more headstrong and one for herself?
And clever. Like, she's the one, she lies.
Oh, that's a good point. No, you're dead right
and
there.
And she's cunning, and she's not as brave because she's not as scared. Bravery is something you have when you overcome your fear. She's brazen. She's not as scared as they are because she is so capable.
That's a good point. And then would Neel be Hufflepuff and KB be
Definitely. Neel would be Hufflepuff. I mean, don't you think that his kindness is his strength, like his compassion?
I think his empathy, yeah. Kindness, empathy. No matter what happens, if he's told to do something, he does not with Wim, it's like, why would you tell me to do that? Whereas with Neel, he's like, someone's telling me to do something probably for a reason, so I should probably do what they tell me. If I don't know what I'm doing and someone tells me to do something, I'll do it. And that's a really valuable team member to have.
He doesn't need to be the leader. You know what? The first follower is extremely valuable because it might bring the rest of the people to safety.
100%. And first mate is even spoken about in this episode. So, we've spoken about the kids a little bit. So with the, we've got Smee, well, SM33. What have you, I mean, he wasn't really in this episode, unfortunately, but what have you found about him?
I think he's been very entertaining.
And what about Jod? Him and Jod, because they were together in this episode. So anything you want to say about those two?
Well, I have always had a thing for Jude Law's accent, like in his voice.
Just say Jude Law. He's just...
Well, there are certain voices that... It's not just Jude Law. Like, I have a thing for Robin Hood. And for years, it was, I think that he could be the live action Robin Hood. I don't think he can anymore. I think he's outaged it. But his voice is still so sexy. And he is charismatic and sexy. And I never for a second believed that he was a good guy in this show. But it didn't matter because he was so entertaining to watch. And I don't care if there's morally gray.
You normally prefer it, isn't it? That's normally a preference of yours, actually. The Loki effect.
Yes.
The low-key Loki effect. There we go.
The low-key Loki effect.
Yeah. So, and then with Smee as well going bad in air quotes initially and going kind of scary, and then also now he's kind of with Jod. Have you found that? Do you like that? Like him not being with the kids for a little bit?
No, I want him to... That was a traumatic moment when he had to switch. Like, and if it hadn't happened, it would have been bad writing. If somehow he magically didn't have to obey this time, I would have been annoyed. Even though I want him with the kids and I want him to follow Fern, that's not the world that they established. So I thought that was good storytelling where, sorry, I have to do what the captain says.
Yeah, and I feel like the showrunner's John Watts, who's done the Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy, and I think he's really nailed it. And I think that obviously all the other individuals involved, other writers and directors, obviously again, Bryce Dallas Howard did this, and the actors have really brought it to life. I just think that this really encapsulates some of the magic that the original Star Wars held in the respect of, I think Star Wars' problem a lot of the time is when it is, especially with the marketing, which I know you don't generally have to see too much of, but when it goes, we're going to be this show and this show and this show and this show, and we're going to fit into this thing, and we're going to do this amazing thing and this amazing thing. And Skeleton Crew, even from the trailers and from all the press and stuff, is so unassuming. And that's what Andor was like in a lot of respects, where it was literally just, and to be fair, Mandalorian Series 1 was actually quite low-key. It took a little, people were talking about, this is going to be a live action Star Wars show, but it was really only after a first couple of episodes came out, then everyone kind of was like, oh my God, Star Wars show, even though the rest of us were like, yeah, we already...
Right, we were already watching because Star Wars...
I've been excited about this for ages, but it's one of those where I think certain shows that aren't overtly going like, we are going to be the show that has the best lightsaber battle, or this show was just like, we need an adventure of kids who are in the Star Wars universe, but are still somehow amazed by space travel and that stuff. How can we do that? And it's like, the initial thing when we see the trailers and stuff, again, I'm not saying anything that's in the trailers, but like what you saw had no indication of At-Atin or the mystery of At-Atin. And that's the hook, I think. You've got the characters, so you're interested by the stakes of what happens to them. You've got a fun new character, Smee, SM33, who's really cool. You've got like the morally grey, will he, won't they, kind of Jude Law, kind of will he go bad, will he not? And then you've got the hook of the plot, which is the At-Atin mystery. It makes it work in the plot of like how they kind of know a bit about the Star Wars universe, but they don't actually know that much, while also understanding conceptually that hyperspace is possible. Yeah, we have ships flying around, they just don't go too far. So I think the writing of this show, what they did is they kind of went, here's an idea. Okay, then how would that work? Well, we'd need that. Okay, how would that work? We'd need that. And I think what Star Wars sometimes does is they go, here's a project. We need these 4 things in them, right around things to get these things in. And that's one of its biggest problems. Yeah. So what have you found about all that? The writing At-Atin, anything else regarding that?
I have enjoyed the writing overall. Like usually for a show that has all kinds of hype, I'm sitting there going, but this, and I'm not feeling like that. And I think possibly it's because they're just telling the story in the amount of time it needs to happen. You don't have that situation where it feels like they had to fill this space. No, the minutes that they're showing matter. There have been a few nitpicky things, but I can't even remember previous to this episode what some of them are. Like, I might remember them later, but they're not things I've been dwelling on. I would say my only nitpick about this one was the whole shedding of skin with the.
I was gonna
ask about that. That is so ridiculous.
It was I've never seen anything like that before. Maybe something like Star Trek or some other show or a book that I don't know about, but I've not seen that idea before. I think I can hand wave it away. I think you can go, the outer shell of the ship is not as dense a material as the inside of the ship. That's kind of how I would guess it. Or like, because the button is almost like, has the inner ship designed to kind of have these little, the button just pop loads of things? I don't know. Magnet clamps. I think you can hand wave it away.
But I don't want hand wavy things. I want things to make sense. Like, we have Wim in, like, that was such a great moment where everyone's like, okay, I'm going to do a thing to help us. We have to make decisions and move fast. Even though we're children, it doesn't matter. We just have to do this thing so that we all survive. And he was finally doing something helpful, not saying, I want to be the one flying the plane, or, I want to be the one who's making the decisions. Everyone just jumped into their role, helping each other. And then they ruin it with this, oh, this happened. Come on, that ship would have been destroyed already. The things that it was doing, like that claw,
yeah, I found
it would have been breaking that part too.
There's also a bit where they're in the bridge looking at the crab thing, and I was like, they are probably 30 meters away from that. And then it changed, and I saw the ship get crushed, and I was like, but that's where they were, wasn't it? And then they're not there, and I was like, right. That bit did, it did the thing which I don't like, which is when he goes, oh my god, something's coming at you. And then every time it cuts to it, it's basically in the same place, even though lots of time, or it's like, oh, it's getting closer, and then they edit it, so it zooms out a bit, and then it's still, do you know what I mean? And I'm like, if you're gonna
they don't edit it, they reset the shot, and it's like some of the things are cheated. They're like, "Well, just cheat it and make it look like it," and that bothers me. It bothers me because I think it bothers me more because I work on sets and I've seen them do it, so I know what is happening, and it's like, you can see it, you can see that it's wrong, you can see that it doesn't fit right.
Yeah, I feel like the way to write out of that, I would have had Wim shoot part of the crab thing. Get stuck for a moment, and him go, I've done it, and then you see it twitching and go, I don't think I've got it. Yeah, and then they go, I don't think I've got it. It's only got a few seconds. So that, because when he started shooting the claws, I thought, oh, he's going to go for the mechanisms, whatever, the joints, and it's going to freeze it, and it didn't. And I was like, what? Why is he okay?
And then everyone would have done something to get them out of that situation. They all would have come together, each contributing somehow. But instead, they made it so that he went and did this thing without arguing, just jumping into action, being heroic, and being a good team player, and it was ineffective. Yet somehow he's in that cockpit thing, and it wasn't affected by this whole
skin shedding. Yeah,
right. Like, he was outside of the vehicle. How did that
wonder? I was like, how was
that the one thing that you kept from the outside ship? Like,
yeah. No. And it was unaffected, not scratched, and he just kind of ducked and he was okay. I was like, okay. Yeah, that bit.
And even if there is an undership, it wouldn't be pristine. Like, that thing was so old. It would still be old on the inside.
Well, it'd be scratched and crushed, even if you said it was pristine, it would have been scratched and crushed in part by the crab claws going into it and pulling away.
Right.
So half
and
the ship,
all of the other damage this ship has taken during this, this whole adventure.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. I concede that, but I still I don't think it's too. It's a bit like okay that bit, but I think it's not like. It's not as bad as certain things in other shows where we're like that overtly ruins it. It's more like, okay, if I think too much about this. It hasn't
ruined it. It was just a moment where I was going, oh my gosh, that's so stupid. But it didn't ruin it.
No, 100%. I know we're getting nearer.
There is a worse moment in The Dark Knight.
In The Dark Knight, not Dark Knight Rises. I was going to say, because that's got...
Oh, you know what? It's not The Dark Knight. It's Batman Begins. There's a worse moment in Batman Begins.
Oh, okay. Are you going to elaborate, or is we leaving it there?
Nice coat. It is just the worst. It comes off the best scene in the entire Nolan Batman universe, and they ruin it in 2 words. Nice coat. Shut up.
I don't even remember that scene. I've seen the film like 2 or 3 times.
You would not say that. Don't ruin my Batman.
Okay, well, There we go. I mean, you're a very passionate Batman person and Catwoman, but I'm like a casual. I'm a Batman casual. Read a few comics, watched all the films, but before we wrap up, because I know our time is more limited, I just want to say there's a couple of little things we haven't touched on, and we did all the plugs at the start, so we can do our pretty hard finish. I just want to say that basically one of the things I really liked about this was linking with what you said earlier, which is two kind of quotes, loosely paraphrasing. One of them is, not everyone can do things the same way you can. The kind of idea of what Neel says to Fern, and her realization there. And then also KB saying Fern acts like KB can do anything Fern can do, which obviously links with what you said. And again, it's the whole linking of even without thinking about a disability necessarily,
right?
It still is really important that all of us have got different skills, all of us have different talents. And yeah, you might be the sporty one, you might be this one, you might be like, I had this issue when I was in maths class, maths, Americans, not math. It's mathematics. Okay. Anyway, Megan would be proud of me because she hates the math thing. She gets mad about it. The thing is when I was in maths, I remember there was a point where someone was getting stuck on something and I flew by it because I was pretty good at maths. And I remember saying, oh, this is really easy. And then they were obviously annoyed by it because I was basically being a dick because it wasn't easy for them. And then there was a point, a later lesson, where I didn't get something and I was like, I don't understand this. And then they'd been holding on to that thing and I don't hold it against them. And they were like, oh, you don't get it. And they were like, and I was like, oh no, that's really, and those were like core memories to me of like, you're a dick then and you got your comeuppance. So remember that. So I felt, and it was,
remember this part.
yeah. And that was when I was, like 13 or something or 14. I was like, that was one of those moments. And I feel like in this kind of show that it's giving a lot of these kind of moments to these kids, which I love.
Because it's an important lesson for people to know that, yes, you might be really skilled in this area, but you need to understand that not everyone is. And guess what? You're probably really deficient in something that somebody else thinks is super easy, and they don't even have to think about it. It's so easy.
100%. And is there any sort of last things, because we've pretty much I think we've touched upon everything, apart from Jude Law, basically the airlock thing. I felt like I was walking the plank. I like the pirate stuff. I think all that's kind of fun. I like having pirates, not the Empire, all that kind of jazz. So I'll say that, and then I'll pass it back to you. Final kind of thoughts, anything we haven't touched upon yet, and then we'll wrap up.
I want to know what your thoughts are about cameos, because I feel like some shows are ruined by cameos. And this one is doing great so far.
I want Hondo to pop up. And
I do too.
As long as Hondo, one cameo, just him saving them, or even just one line of dialogue so we know it's him, I would be happy with that. And you can see him in live action at Galaxy's Edge, so they've done the prosthetics.
It's a missed opportunity. He is the pirate of the universe. We have to at least have a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder if if Skeleton Crew may get another season and maybe he'll pop up in that. I don't know. I mean, Hondo at the moment, he's in like a big chunk of the DLC for the Star Wars Outlaws game. So he's there in Galaxy's Edge. He's like the main person for Smuggler's Run. And there's the actor who played him. You get to see him like with full prosthetics on. At least I think it's him. Sounds like him. So they haven't forgotten about Hondo, and he is alive in the sequels.
So you know more than I do because of all of that.
So I've technically spoiled something for you, and I'm sorry. So Hondo is alive in the sequels, but at least you know he's alive in the sequels, so he will survive through anything in the Mandoverse.
And it's not like I thought he was dead, so you didn't really spoil anything. It's just different content that I was probably never going to read.
No, well, I mean, he isn't in anything. It's animation. He's in like 2 or 3 comics. That's it. The only reason I know he's alive in the sequels is because Galaxy's Edge is canon, and it's him being there speaking to certain characters and stuff. It's a canon event, so yeah, good fun. But yeah, Skeleton Crew, good fun. Really enjoying it. Thank you so much for coming on again, Tonya. Obviously, everyone can find you at Ms. Tonya Todd anywhere. And any other final thoughts before I say those magical words?
No, I'm just enjoying the series, and I'm glad we have a fun Star Wars show that we don't have to argue about its merits and the toxic fandom.
Yeah, they've been very, very quiet recently. I wonder why. But yeah, and we've got Andor to look forward to as well. Andor Series 2 in 2025. So very, very excited about that. And I'll do some sort of show on that too. But friends, check out everything in the description. Everything to do with Tonya. I've already written the show notes, so I already know what's going to be in there. Pre-order 52 Love, which comes out on Valentine's Day. Pick up Comics Lit Volume 1. Keep your eye out and ears out for Morning Sacrifice. Check out the Femon Collective, and then check out anything else that Tonya's got going on. All that's in the description. All the other stuff I've got going on is in the description. Guest spots and other Star Wars content. All that great stuff. You can watch this on YouTube, subscribe, like, share, review, all that great stuff. And so, friends, there's nothing left to say apart from, may the Force be with you.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars Comics in Canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.